I'd just like to welcome everyone to Introduction to Alternative Text Tags. This is designed to be a crash course in what alternative text does and how to create it and apply it so it's most effective for users who live with disabilities. The information found in this presentation includes tips based upon the experiences and opinions of digital accessibility by WeCo staff and should not be construed as legal advice. Regarding the development and implementation of digital accessibility practices, it's advisable to seek the advice of qualified legal counsel. The information in this presentation is the property of the Wehrman Collaborative, LLC, which is our fancy name. Please ask us before distributing this information by contacting us at access at the WeCo, accessinfo at theweco.com. And I apologize, I am just going to stop share for just a minute because I know why my presentation is advancing of its own free will. And I am just going to fix that. And I am not able to get that corrected. So there may be a little advance notice on some of these slides. Guys. It's always lovely when your slideshow takes on a life of its own in the middle of a webinar. All right. Right, so you should be now seeing a slide with my professional headshot on it. My name is Lynn Wehrman. I am a former federal program coordinator, and I was one of the early digital accessibility specialists in state government dating back to about 2008. I'm also the founder and president of Digital Accessibility by WeCo, and I am a person and a professional living with two cognitive disabilities. This slide shows my photo. I am a petite blonde person identifying as female. And in the picture, I am wearing a little bit of our WeCo logo wear and a professional headshot. My hair's shorter than it is now. Now it's about below my ears. So a little bit more about us. WeCo is a company of digital accessibility professionals with a mission, putting you in touch with subject matter experts or SMEs who live with disabilities. We are members of the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, and we also provide our own rigorous training requirements for our people. This slide shows an IAAP logo. It also shows a WeCo accessibility specialist named Dane using screen magnification software while conducting a manual accessibility audit. Sorry about that. If the words, because simulations can't replace human interaction. So what we do, WeCo offers manual accessibility audit services that can help your team understand which areas of a project do and do not meet accessibility requirements. We also provide customized recommendations on how to fix those issues. And that is in alignment with Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. We also offer our own unique usability testing services that are focused on how people living with disabilities interact with your websites and mobile apps, for instance. So all of our testers at WeCo, as all of our accessibility professionals, live with one or more disability as a requirement of their job role. So that makes us a little bit unique. So we offer consulting, training, in-person and remote, and also e-learning. A few tips to help our webinar go smoothly today. Remember, mute yourself. If there is noise coming from your microphone, our moderator will mute you. If you wish to use the chat box, please be mindful of the drop-down designation for everyone. So that means that whatever you say will be broadcast to everybody in the webinar. If you want to reach out to us for assistance, please select WeCo moderator. We actually have two moderators in the room today. We have Ellen DeCesar and we have Chad Cook. He's not designated as a moderator, but Chad is there to help you as well. Accessibility accommodations must be placed in advance to our registration process, so please note that we cannot fulfill accommodation requests that are placed through the chat box today. We do have closed captioning available for you in the by clicking the CC button. Today, we won't be able to teach you everything you want to know about alternative text. For instance, we won't be discussing all of the WCAG requirements for alt text or where to insert them into documents, websites, and social media. WeCo does offer courses on this in our WeCo University, our online digital accessibility portal, and we can tell you more about that later. But what we will do is give you tips for writing effective alternative text. It's our hope that this webinar will also get you to think about how the alt text you write impacts the people who encounter it. Finally, we will work with you to help you find a middle ground and have more confidence as you move forward crafting your alt text. This slide is a comparison chart of the before named information of what we will present and what we won't present. But before we get started, allow me to share some personal insight with you. I was born with 2 cognitive disabilities, and having lived as a targeted user while trying to meet the communications of other people who live with disabilities, I've learned a major lesson, and that's you will never fully understand someone else's experience. Even if you live with a disability yourself, which can be helpful, you can't understand exactly how they live their life with their disability. You can only listen, make an educated guess, and realize that you're going to miss the mark some of the time. So the key here is that what we want to do is to strive to please the widest audience possible and accept that we won't please everyone. So this slide shows the text I just read written out. So let's begin by defining what alternative text is. This slide shows the following quote from WebAIM, which is one of my favorite accessibility organizations. Alternative text provides a textual alternative to non-text content in web pages. Most common application is alternative text for images only, though the principles can be applied to media, applets, and other non-text web content. That's a long-winded way of saying that alt text makes things that are visual available to non-visual users, and sometimes to those of us who live with cognitive disabilities, it can provide more clarification. That said, one way to look at alt text is like it's painting a picture in someone's mind. It's also a way we can see to it that everyone receives the same information regardless of their disability or lack of disability. As we approach alt text, it's crucial to keep in mind that all human beings learn in different ways. And regardless of if we are able to use our eyes fully or in part, visual information is impactful for us all. This slide shows open paint tins, brushes, and color swatches representing brilliant colors. And in case you didn't realize, I'm writing alt text right in front of you by reading these descriptions out loud. Artificial intelligence is moving us closer to accessibility in some ways and farther away in others. Alternative text is a really good example of this. AI can be helpful in identifying images familiar to its algorithm, but it can totally miss the mark regarding content. I personally appreciate it when AI tries to lighten my workload by attempting to write alternative text for me, but I never assume that it's dialed in right. I always review it. Look at it this way. AI can identify, but we can investigate. When I did some intense alternative text writing for the Department of Transportation, often regarding things that I knew very little about, like the construction of roads and bridges, I began to see my value as a writer. I could take the time and speak with an engineer about a map that they had included or some statistics that I didn't understand and make certain that the alt text would be correct and meaningful to the user. This slide shows an icon of a robot and one of a magnifying glass. The basic principle of alternative text application within the WCAG is that images that provide meaning usually require alternative text. Images that don't contribute meaning may be marked as null or decorative, shown as a yellow conversation bubble on a blue background. But it's important to note that there are some types of images that don't require alt text. First, if the image is part of a page design, like shown on this slide, a curly page divider, something that's just providing like a decorative separation of text. Intended entirely to create a visual break, it offers no information, and so we can mark it as decorative. Or if the image is part of a link. The example we're showing is a tube of lipstick, and next to a link marked lipstick, which might appear on a cosmetic or department store website. This link tells you what the image is, so there's no requirement to repeat the information in an alternative text tag. A few more examples include images with adjacent text describing it. This was very common for the accessible document and website work that I did for the government when I was in early days of my accessibility career. So we used many, many complex charts and graphs. And the page what we're demonstrating today, ours says bar graphs help us demonstrate quantitative changes in data. They may use multiple columns and categories. So this is essentially a description that goes beneath a bar graph. Context note, there were often images that I needed to consult the document's author about to make sure that I was conveying what they needed to convey in that chart and graph. So you can tell that I'm already advocating for you if you are doing document accessibility for someone else to make sure you check out your information. And finally, images that are used for ambiance or eye candy. The example that we're showing is an image of colorful kayaks used to enhance a description on a resort webpage. For instance, Anderson's Resorts has a wide variety of contexts for rent in an array of fun colors. And that's just our demonstration of how that might work of an image that you don't need to add alternative text tag. Now, that said, I can tell you that it may simply be easier if you are working with a group of people who may not be very familiar with accessibility to simply say, write an alt text for everything. There's some of the work that I did in government when we had groups of people that were converting documents to accessibility, for instance, and it was just easier to tell them to alt tag everything than to parse it down to you need to do this, but not this. So that's a consideration too. But how you write your alt tag text begins on many things, depends on many things. The most important is your lens, how you view the subject you're writing about. This is important to understand because it will color the choices you make about your subject. Will your tags be long or short? Should they include a description of colors? Explain the scene pictured by focusing on the objects only, or talk about the action being shown. Or even more importantly, as we become more socially aware, how do we describe our fellow human beings? Do we include their sex, race, ethnicity? Shown as a blurred photo of a city at night with someone holding a magnifying lens and showing part of the cityscape close up in it. Let's begin with short and long description alt tags. Short tags are not complicated and provide basic information about the image. Long tags are more complex and convey more than just simple aspects of the image. The image on this slide is a long tree branch with the word long and a short worm seated on the branch next to the word short. A few rules of thumb for short description alt tags. They are what we use most, cover most web and document basics, and are used to convey simple information. So for instance, on this slide, we're showing an example. We've got a picture of a bunch of stadium seats that are yellow, and the alt tag we're suggesting is yellow stadium seats. Rules of thumb for long description alt text. These are usually graphics that do more or provide layers of visual information the user needs to know. This may include charts, graphs, tables, such as the one shown on this slide. I often use these in my work in state government for legislative studies, which contain charts and embedded tables. But they may also be needed for a photograph that may be covering a lot of action, such as a natural disaster. We use them at the Department of Transportation to explain plat maps demonstrating to the public where new roads were going to be built. As you can imagine, for people living in that neighborhood, that's pretty vital stuff. Is this road going to go through the park I take my kids to, for instance? So having a long alt text would be warranted for something like that. As I alluded to in an earlier slide, many times just looking at an image itself isn't enough, because in many cases, the images are present to support a point found in the text surrounding it. It's vital that you take the time to read the web page or the document, at least in the immediate vicinity of the image. If you're working on someone else's project, this will help you ensure that you're providing the correct information. So on this slide, we're showing a really kind of fascinating image of red and white umbrellas assembled in rows on a beach. Now, we're going to put some of these principles to work, and we're going to get you involved. Hint, this exercise will only work if you respond in the chat box. And I will not give you the answer, so prepare to use your text box, or you could send us an email if that's easier for you to join in this next part. So Ellen, I'm wondering if you could just pop your email address into the chat box if people prefer to email you. And if it's easier, her email address is simply Ellen, ELLEN, @theweco.com. So I would like you to craft an alternative text for this photo. We're going to give you a minute to think, but once we're done, we're going to share your results in the chat box. And we will just see where we land with all of this. All right, so Joe, crowd looking at musical performers on stage. Keep them coming. Taryn, indoor concert. Stephanie, a person standing up in the crowd at a concert with their hands up. Anyone else? Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, Abby, Lisa, a crowd of people enjoying an event. Hi, Lisa. Concert goers in brightly lit arena. Caroline, a person in a crowd at nighttime concert with raised arms, points fingers. So you can see all the variation of detail. And I think one of my favorite stories to tell about alternative text tags is one of the first workshops that we taught as a company back in 2011 when we were actually a concept company. We taught a workshop on accessible Microsoft Word documents. And one of our staff who was blind was talking about how he really liked short, concise alt text. And someone in the audience who was also blind got up and said, I want a lot of information in my alt text. And we kind of had this alt text war going on. But I thought it was a really good demonstration of not being able to please everybody. So you can see how wide and varied in the text box our alternative texts can be. So let's talk a bit more. We've had you describe this image, or the previous image. Now I would like you to describe this image. And for non-visual users, I'm sorry, I didn't describe the other one for non-visual users. These are two women, people who would appear that they identify as female. They are standing over like a planning desk in an office. One person is writing, and the other person is holding what appears to be a tablet and talking with the other person while they are writing. It also looks like it's probably blueprints because there's a roll and it looks like it could be blueprints. So go ahead and try this one. I'll give you a few minutes here. Stephanie has two women discussing a project in an office. Sue says two women working at a desk. Taryn, older women and younger woman working together in an office. Josie, photograph of two women in an office having a conversation about paper strewn on a desk in front of them. One woman is writing, other holding a tablet. Thank you for the example of the long alt text, Josie. Shelley, two people standing over a desk with paper. And Jenna, potentially decorative. Thanks for exhausting all the possibilities. Now, this is a very different image than the first image. It brings up some interesting questions about how we're writing this alt text. So allow me to guide you through some questions about what you wrote and what you might think about regarding your choices. And so these are going to show up on the screen for visual users as I read them out. So first of all, can you determine what these people are doing? And how might you better determine that? Maybe asking the author, or maybe you know. What is their work role? What is their favorite color? What did they eat for lunch? What is their race? How about their gender? How about their pronoun preferences? And how vital are the details of your description to your reader's understanding? So the reason that we bring this up is because it is really very common for us when we're teaching alternative text tags and when we're working with clients on accessible documents, for people to not agree on the level of information that's needed. And think about, is there something that you should or should not leave out, depending upon your audience? And what happens if your readers don't agree with you? Okay. This slide shows figures, stick figures standing in a row. Why we want to prompt you to think about this is how we're crafting alternative text aids, providing needed detail and being sensitive or being offensive. Does it mean bring meaning to a wider audience or a narrower one? Is it possible to craft alt tags in a way that informs respectfully? And can we determine what respectfully means all on our own? At WeCo, the audio description as part of our slide presentations, which I've been demonstrating for you, where I describe visually what we're showing on the slides for non-visual users, can bring up a lot of controversy because our alt text is read out loud for everyone to hear. For us, the alt text impacts many people, even those who don't depend upon us and depend upon it to know what the image is. This has created opportunities for us to better understand how our alt tags impact people and to find new ways to be inclusive and respectful surrounding them. So examples. At some events last year, when I described a person as a person of color, a person in the audience who was of color came to me and said that they had taken offense to being singled out and identified as a person of color. And then in another presentation, another person of color thanked me for the delineation. Still, another person came to me following a presentation and said that I should never delineate gender identification because we can never know if someone considers themselves to be male, female, non-binary. It's so this hit me as one of my best friends is transgender and an associate of mine is non-binary. And I understand how difficult it has been for them to be put into a category by how they appear differently to others without any consideration for how they see themselves. So this is something that really hit home to me when we got that feedback. So our response to this is that our company has made some decisions about how we will write alt text and other descriptions. Keep in mind that these are not best practices. They are simply decisions that we made for our company and that you will need to make decisions for your own. So our group decided that pointing out the type of disabilities that people live with is necessary because it gives context to our work. So for instance, when we're in a presentation or doing a training and we talk about displaying a picture of a person using a Braille laptop, that we need to identify that person as a non-visual user or blind because that makes sense in explaining what we're trying to teach. They is a more inclusive reference than he, she, his, and hers, and is less likely to offend people. Pointing out race and gender actually serves no informational purpose to our work. And so that is not something that we do. And using people first references that apply to everyone, not just people with disabilities, is an important part of what we do. So this is the time that we're opening things up for discussion. But I know that's a lot to think about. So we want to make sure that if you've got questions, we can answer those. Ellen, are we getting any questions in chat?
It looks like a couple of raised hands.
Taryn, go ahead. Ask your question.
It's more of just a comment. I appreciate the rules because I always for Hennepin County, we're putting up a lot of the images because I work in the content management system, and I've been questioning this, like, should I be putting race? Should I be putting age? Should I be putting gender? But like, I can't assume from just a photo. I don't know who took it, what the context is. I don't know their pronouns, you know, so just putting they and just giving some, I just wanted to comment that I appreciate that feedback. So it's something to think about. And then I do have a question on charts and maps. See Joe just post something. We tend to like when we put up like, you know, bar graphs or something, sometimes I'll put in like, or like a pie chart, we'll put in like 50% are Hispanic, 25% are white. Is that not necessary then? Or what would you, it gets to be really long.
You know, you could do it a couple of ways, and this webinar is so abbreviated that we can't get into a lot of that drill down, but I can bring in a little more context for you. So you might want to do basically a long description caption. And what I like about those is that draws information out of that bar graph or chart or whatever it is for people that may have difficulty. Like when my disability is really active, it's very difficult for me to, you know, look at a complex chart and know what they're trying to put across. So I think sometimes when we've got those complicated images, it's almost better to just put it in that description or what looks like a caption. So that's available for everybody. I think you have to always go back to who is my audience and what do they need to know? What is it that is going to make it easier for them to get the information they need? Does that help?
Yeah, no, it helps a lot. We did implement like long text in our descriptions, but I just feel I still struggle with it a little bit. So thank you.
Yeah, and the struggle is real.
I know.
And it doesn't go away ever. So my husband was career Army, and he always says, embrace the suck. That's what they did. He was a West Point graduate, and he said, we learned to embrace the suck. That's it.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Joe, did that answer your question? Or did
It mostly did. It mostly did, but I do have a follow-up quickly regarding maps, which is, you know, when you have a map that's showing directions or like how to get somewhere. For example, like we did a long alt text for the sheriff's website that had a map for how to get somewhere, and we really painstakingly wrote out the actual instructions for how to get somewhere because that's what the map showed. And I'm just wondering, is that what people need? Do they need the exact same information that a visual user would get from that, or is the topic of the map enough? Like map describing such and such, but you're not giving them instructions for how to get somewhere.
And when you're in government, you're really in a unique position because, you know, your job is to make sure that the public all has the same information. My recommendation is that, and what I intend to do when I'm working on documents is the map. People are using that to get somewhere, and just saying it's a map to our to the Hennepin County Government Center in downtown Minneapolis is not giving them the same information as someone who's sighted who can see which streets to take. So what I would do is I would actually put it in the text below. So I have a tendency to go, okay, here are the written instructions to Hennepin County Government Center as demonstrated visually in the map above. Is you never know when somebody who can see the map isn't getting it, like me, the cognitive disability person. When my depression is active, it's going to be harder. I appreciate having it written out. Does that help?
It does help. And just one quick follow-up. When you write it below, or if you write it in a caption area, is that instead of alt text, or is that in addition to alt text?
No, you actually, according to the WCAJ, you can do it instead. What we have a tendency to do is like a short descriptor alt text, so that when, so that says this is the map that demonstrates the directions that are typed out below. Because we're super thorough about how I just believe that even a short description alt text, when it's not warranted, can be really helpful unless something's decorative.
Okay, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Yep. And I'm not the alt text police, so I won't be coming and checking on them, but that's just my personal thoughts. Peter, thanks for waiting. Go ahead.
Sure. Going back to the slide with the two women, I think whether you identify race really depends on what's the broader context of where this picture is. Is this about some organization that's working on equity issues or something on that sort? So you really have to look at a much broader context. Then I think it would be very important to designate race, but in other situations it probably wouldn't.
Right, and that's it exactly. We had someone take this workshop a few months ago who worked for a social justice organization, and they said, we would point out race because that's the point we're trying to make. Or, another instance might be if this is your HR department and the page is about diversity and equity in hiring practices, maybe that would be prudent. Any other questions? We do have a few minutes yet. Is there anything in chat, Ellen?
Yes, Josie had a question about how to write alt text for Instagram carousels that contain text on slides, and if you need to write the text that is on the slides inside the caption box or just describe the images in the post.
So the infographics are a real interesting dilemma about accessibility, because I know that there are people who believe that we shouldn't be using them, but at the same time I see organizations that are dedicated to accessibility that do use them. I also think that they can be super useful for people with cognitive disabilities, which, by the way, those of us with cognitive disabilities kind of get brushed under the rug with accessibility because people think, oh, well, there's nothing we need to do. I hear that a lot. Oh, we don't have to worry about cognitive disabilities. And I'm like, hello. Yeah, you do. So I will be honest that it has been a while since I've worked in Instagram because I no longer do our social media. But I believe that there is the capability to do a formal alternative text tag in Instagram. And whenever you have that a bit of availability, you should use it. It's in LinkedIn, it's in Facebook. I'm 99% sure it's in Instagram. If you are using, I know that one of the issues we've had is that some of our social media people have used a software that didn't allow them to insert an alt text, then we make them write it in below in the text in parentheses. And I think that you can use infographics as long as you are tagging them, just like you would alternative text. One thing you do want to watch about infographics that I know our document team has pointed out to me is that make sure that that color contrast is adequate, so that the background and the lettering are different enough so that people with low vision can pick up on those. That's really an important thing that I think gets overlooked a lot. Okay, and Caroline, who's kind of one of our accessibility buddies in the field, has some more information for you on Instagram. Thanks for sharing that, Caroline. Any other questions? We could take one more if we have any, Ellen, or raised hands.
Oh, looking back through, I'm not seeing any. Oh,
Caroline, go ahead, Caroline.
Hi, I just wanted to say, just it's so hard to cover everything in alt text. These questions are great, and a lot of them, are things that you can Google and get some like much more direct answers to. So there's lots of sites dedicated specifically to what are called complex images, which include infographics, maps, that kind of thing, if you Google it. So yeah, just a reminder that like those are out there as well.
Thanks. And and it's a great idea, but do watch your resources. We really, really endorse W3C resources and WebAIM, which in the US is it's federally funded. It's with your tax dollars. The WebAIM project has just really excellent information. So it's like anything, get your medical advice from proven authorities like the CDC or whatever it is, whatever medical group that you know to be reputable. Just make sure that you're getting information from reputable resources, because it's a little bit like the Wild West of accessibility right now. And we're lucky to have the IAAP that gives us some certification and some guidance, and W3C, of course. So please watch your resources. All right, just to follow up with some next steps. We are going to be sending out some resources after this. We'll be sending out information to the W3C. They have a really good alt tag decision tree, and we'll send out that link to you and a link to WeCo's own resource page, and then the recording will be made available. So we will get that out to you. We do a rough recording, what we call a rough recording, which is the direct, uncorrected text. So you get that immediately, but it takes about a week for our post-production captioning to get everything right, and then we update that link. Other things we got coming up that are free, come back and join us. About every few months, we do a getting started in accessibility webinar, which is really great if you've got coworkers or colleagues who are trying to figure out how to get this going. Tuesday, November 7th. We are also, November 16th, sponsoring a free webinar on accessible video and slide decks. And we are going to be doing a great WordPress accessibility webinar on Thursday, December 14th with our friends from Desert Wing Design. They are a unique accessibility-driven web design organization we work with. And then, of course, the Monday after US Thanksgiving is our accessibility meetup. Deep dive into focus styles. That'll be sponsored by our own WeCo accessibility specialists. And just a reminder that we've got expansion on all these documents on WeCo University on-demand learning. If you'd like to learn more about WeCo University, we do have pretty low-cost annual all-access fee to that. Just contact us at accessinfo@theweco.com. Other free resources, just go to theweco.com/resources, our free accessibility library, recordings of webinars like these, more events, more blogs. We're a mission-based organization, so we do give away a lot of things for free. Take advantage of them, like our accessibility blog. You can sign up for that on our website. So thanks so much for joining us today. If there's any way that we can help you, you can reach out to our client relations team at accessinfo@theweco.com, 855-849-5050, extension 1. Thanks, everybody. It was a fun group. I love teaching this class. And thanks, Hennepin County, for coming. Good to see you.